En tout respect, Madame.
Respectfully, Madam Chair, I do not believe there was an agreement on that format. That is to say, what you said we'd be doing. And what is provided for under our rules are 2 rounds of 1 hour each, 2 panels of 1 hour each. But, Madam Chair, I don't want to spend an hour arguing this. I will accept the 5 minutes. However, I do believe that after a first hour, there is supposed to be a reset for speaking length.
I can explain to him.
Monsieur Fortin, on applique.
Mr. Fortin, we are applying the same scenario that we have always applied. Madam Chair, we only have 3/4 an hour left, so I'm not going to argue this. So now there is 2.5 minutes. 5 minutes, Madam Chair. Is it 5 or 2.5?
Je n'ai pas reçu le consentement.
I wasn't given unanimous consent for 5 minutes, so now we're on 2.5 minutes. Right. I'm going to stop this discussion now, but we'll be picking this up later. So for 2.5 minutes, Madam Chair. Dr. Islam, in your opinion, I'd like you to comment on the various issues that we're facing. Could they not be addressed if we were to make sure that governments are neutral, that they manage their affairs without necessarily taking positions or rather showing preference to one religion or another within Canada? Could you try answering me in 30 seconds because I don't have much time?
In 30 seconds. No, I don't think that works. I think you may have seen some illustrations about equity and equality, and if everyone is not starting at the same standing point, then everyone won't realize their full potential.
Dr. Islam,
if you're a community that's marginalized, then
Dr. Islam, je m'excuse, mais
Dr. Islam, I'm so sorry, I don't have much time, but if we're talking about if we're not going to talk about a secular state, then which religion prevails? Is it Islam or another one? So could we not have a neutral secular state, or should there be preference given to one or another? What would you say?
That's the wrong question.
C'est ma question.
But it's my question, so I need an answer. I'm wondering whether the government should be secular, or whether there should be one religion that takes precedence over another. How do you view this?
The government should be responsible for building cohesion and for stopping hatred. If you're forcing secularism and taking away people's rights, then that's not secularism anymore.
Vous m'avez mal compris.
I believe you've misunderstood what I was saying. I was talking about the state itself, the government. But anyway, now I don't have any time left. I'm sorry, we'll have to pick this up another time.
Examples from you when you say that question.
Okay, merci, thank you. Mr. Garrison, 2.5 minutes, and the clerk will go and explain it to you, Mr. Fortin, as to how the minutes are working. But Mr. Garrison, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I hope we don't continue our internal bickering at the expense of witness time. I want to go back to the Youth Coalition Combating Islamophobia, and we had very powerful personal testimony from Ms. Al-Sabawi, but we didn't get to hear as much as I would like to hear about the activities of the YCCI, and I'd like to give those representatives more time to talk about what they've actually been doing to combat Islamophobia.
I can touch on that. So what YCCI focuses on is advocacy and just kind of making Muslim youth feel more empowered in their identities. advocacy in the sense of knowing your rights. And unfortunately, Muslim youth have to take that into their own hands now, and really a responsibility that should not fall on their shoulders. Maria mentioned it over and over and over in her talks, and it's unfortunately a responsibility that's been put on a few of us, people that are just trying to figure their way through life, just like all of you were at our age. But it's about empowering Muslim youth to know their rights and to be proud of their identities and to not have to be afraid of who they are and what they believe in.
And can you talk specifically about how you carry out that activity of making people unafraid and more proud?
So there's a couple aspects to what we do. One of them being kind of just creating environments where Muslim youth are surrounded by each other and kind of feel supported. Another aspect is kind of through legislation and policy and the work that we do within education systems. We have created curriculums within the Thames Valley District School Board, which is a great starting point for nationally to kind of look into that and apply those so that that responsibility doesn't fall down on the people that are victims again and again. So it's about education. Even in police training, police training, we have inputted parts of the curriculum that are now mandated in training. So it's about standardizing education on anti-Islamophobia. Absolutely.
Thanks very much for those specific examples. Very little time here. Can you just tell me if there are other communities that have parallel organizations to YCCI operating?
I am sure that they exist. Are you talking about specifically youth combating Islamophobia?
Yes.
Or within other communities? I'm not too sure. I'm sure that they exist, but I'm not
If there are any that you're aware of, you can submit that to the committee if you find out after the meeting. That's not a problem. Thank you very much. We will now continue with our first round with 5 minutes to MP Van Popta, followed by 5 minutes to MP Ali.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us here today. Dr. Islam, my first question is for you, and first of all, my sympathies to you and your family, because I understand that you're related to the Afzal family, who were the victims of a brutal attack in London 3 years ago. So, Dr. Veltman, I'm not going to use the person's name. The person who was ultimately convicted of this attack was charged and convicted of 4 separate charges of first-degree murder and 1 of attempted murder. But in addition, the Superior Court of Ontario also found that that he had committed acts of terrorism. That didn't make any difference to the sentencing, but I want to know from you, in your opinion, whether it made a difference. Does it make a difference to you and to your family and to the broader Muslim community, and I would say to all of Canadians, that this person was also found guilty of an act of terrorism?
I'll speak what it means to me. It came as a very necessary and a very healing type of decision. I'll tell you that the day after that decision came down, I was driving my son to the gym, and on our drive there, we passed by 2 men wearing turbans, I assume Sikh men wearing turbans. And I thought to myself, boy, from what happened yesterday, you guys are safer today. That was a big, important message of safety and security to any visible minority in Canada. And I think that decision was correct, and it was something that makes me feel safer, that this is a possible deterrent to someone who might think in the future of using a vehicle as a weapon.
Good. Thank you for that, sir. I'm going to turn to the youth representatives, and Dareen particularly. Now, your friend Miriam gave testimony, but she's not here at the moment. But I have a quote from her that I found in a publication, I think it was from the CBC. She is quoted as saying this. I'll just read it and then I'm going to ask your comments on it. We didn't just lose Yamna and her beautiful family. We lost her sense of belonging. We lost her sense of community. We lost her sense of safety and her sense of self. We even lost our innocence. If Marion was here, I would put that question to her, just expand on that. So I'm going to put it to you instead, Doreen. What do you say about that?
Well, I think that statement will mean something special to each person that hears it. And I don't want to completely speak over how it may touch her, but to me, it just means I don't feel as Canadian as everybody else. I don't feel safe when I walk the streets. I remember I was thinking about how a few years ago when we tragically lost the Afzal family, no one wanted to go on walks anymore. Everyone was scared to leave the house. And in the past year, with the increase of Islamophobic incidents and anti-Palestinian racism, we have seen that increase significantly. It's really heartbreaking to know that we are not supported, we are not protected. We have to use the buddy system. For the past few months, we've had to use the buddy system just walking around from one building to the next on campus. It means that we consistently have to go out of our way to look out for ourselves because we're not being looked out for by our representatives, by the people that are supposed to be speaking for us and protecting us.
Good, thank you. So, Doreen, I'm just going to continue with you. You were quoted in this CTV a couple of years ago in response to federal party leaders making promises to condemn Islamophobia and to make promises to fight it. And you had said, quote, I don't think they've addressed it in any sense. Please act on what you say.
30 seconds.
So perhaps you could just comment on that very quickly. What, in your opinion, has the federal government done? Have they kept this promise?
So I'm going to try and as briefly as I can kind of elaborate on that. And it's the idea that in the language and the narrative that Hamza has touched on, and I think Dr. Ali has also touched on quite a bit, it's very shaky in condemning and standing against what we are seeing today. When you are passive about the Muslim lives lost, thousands of them across seas, you are passive about Muslim lives lost nationally. And so that's what teaches the populations. What we are seeing is firm language being used by the government and firm policies such as Bill C-21. And that kind of really shows where the government stands because shaky words of empathy don't hold, but policy does and firm action does.
Just for the benefit of our members asking questions and our witnesses, I am going to hold the time from here on in because we will need to conclude within 30 minutes, and I do need a minute at the end. So when I interrupt you, because probably I will, please do not take offense, and it's not personal, but I have no choice. We will now go to Mr. Shafkat Ali for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here and for the powerful presentation, especially the Miriam. Dr. Islam, I'm a father of 3. I was there in London after that tragedy happened. My daughter goes to school. She's in grade 9, and she wears a hijab. After that incident, I don't let her walk home or go to school by walking. My wife, she picks her and she drops her off at school. That incident has put a lasting impact on every Muslim in Canada. I never felt that way before, and my kids and family, they never felt prior to that event. And when you were talking about that incident and the feelings of your son and daughter, I could relate to my family. I just wanted to ask that how do you feel that the court decision I know you talked about it, and how you see that the government's respond, or our law enforcement and the courts' response to that incident. Do you think are we working on improving to tackle Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or not? It's just what's your thoughts on that, please?
Mr. Ali, there are several things that my wife and I are speaking to people on the provincial level regarding Islamophobia in the court system. On a federal level, one measure that I would like to see is the ability for a judge to include a vehicle as a weapon when they say that there's a weapons ban. Currently, it doesn't apply to vehicles if the vehicle was used in the index crime. It applies to guns and knives and explosives. The perpetrator of this crime specifically said that he wanted to inspire people to use vehicles because guns are harder to come by in Canada than, let's say, the U.S. Our criminal code can be modernized to reflect a reality that people may use non-traditional weapons, and that should be under the purview of the trial judge to include in a weapons ban. That would be one measure I would be pushing for.
Thank you. Do you the recent report on Islamophobia by the Standing Senate Committee on the Human Rights notes that, according to several witnesses, quote, Canada now leads the G7 in terms of targeted killings of Muslim motivated by Islamophobia, end quote. Given the 2017 Quebec City mosque attack, which killed 6 men during evening prayer and wounded several other, and 2021 attack on the Afzal family in London, could you tell us how awareness of these acts of violence has affected the level of fear in Muslims, and have their safety and security? I would refer this question to Mr. Nalir, please.
Thirty seconds.
I'm so sorry. Is it possible to repeat the question?
Oh, I think I have a 30-second. It's gone. So maybe you could send you in writing.
The question, if you would repeat the question, Mr. Ali, you have time, and perhaps the response can come in writing unless he might be able to respond to it.
A recent report on Islamophobia by the Standing Senate Committee on Human Rights notes that, according to several witnesses, quote, Canada now leads the G7 in terms of targeted killings of Muslims motivated by Islamophobia, end quote. Given the 2017 Quebec City mosque attack, which killed 6 men during evening prayer and wounded several others, and 2021 attack on the Afzal family in London, could you tell us how awareness of these acts of violence has affected the level of fear Muslims have for their safety and security?
Okay,
so if you could kindly submit that
in writing if possible. Given the time, what I'm going to do now, and again, I will be, if I need to be mindful of time, we will go to 5 minutes each to each of the 4 parties, beginning with Ms. Gladue, please, followed by MP Ahsasi, Monsieur Fortin, and Mr. Garrison. 5 minutes each, and that will conclude our day for today.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. And for those of you who have experienced loss of your loved ones, I want to add my personal condolences as well. I was really struck by what Omar Babili talked about when he talked about the impact it had when his church was attacked. and the local politicians really did nothing. And it resonated with me because we've had 100 Christian churches in this country torched, and the Liberal government has said and done nothing. And on our anti-Semitism study that we just were finishing, we heard about all of the 500% increase in anti-Semitic hate events, and they felt as well that the federal government had not adequately acted. Now, I'm interested to hear then on Islamophobia, because since 2017, there's been a House of Commons study on Islamophobia that brought forward 16 recommendations. There's been the Senate report that was mentioned that made 60 recommendations on what the government could do. There's been a national summit in Canada on Islamophobia. The government put a special representative in place to combat Islamophobia. And so I guess with all of that, I would ask Omar, do you feel that the efforts of the federal government has decreased Islamophobia in Canada?
Thank you for your question. I'm not quite sure since I don't know the federal government, what they're doing about Islamophobia. I would have to come back to that question.
Okay, very good. Same question for Monsieur Naylor.
I think there are, like you mentioned, there have been things that have been done. I'm just worried that it can be communicated better in terms of people on the ground. That's what I would say.
Thank you. What do you think is contributing to the rise in Islamophobia that we're seeing in Canada?
I think, as Dr. Islam mentioned as well, when people look different, naturally there's that ignorance there. However, when those things aren't addressed, not just addressed amongst the common people, but addressed by people in power, I think that gives strength, and that gives a common. It's okay to talk about Islam. It's okay to address Islamophobia when the people at the top are also addressing it. It's not a taboo topic anymore, and I think that helps.
And a question, I think, for all of you. We've certainly seen a lot of incidents that are in the news that has to do with the situation in Gaza and what's happening here on the ground in Canada, rail being blocked in BC, occupation at Union Station, many blocked infrastructure, demonstrations. What impact do you think this is having on Islamophobia, if any? We'll start with Omar.
In my perspective, the peaceful protest which is happening here in Canada, they are showing the good side of Muslims. For example, we have a lot of Christians, a lot of Jewish people coming to support us. And it just showing, since it's very peaceful protest, they're not doing anything illegal there. I think we're showing people are changing their mind about Islam. Like a lot of people I met, they start reading about Islam, they start liking Islam, and they shared their opinion with me about Islam. So I think it's helping to reduce Islamophobia rather than increasing it. That's what's in my opinion.
That's great. Dr. Islam.
As I mentioned, the rise of anti-Muslim hatred from one category of the building blocks, I think, has an unknown effect, but probably does have a real effect on Islamophobia coming from other building blocks. There certainly is a small minority of Canadians, but a real one, who think that Canada is a construct for people of European heritage. And that construct, that belief, leads to othering of many different minorities, not just Muslims.
Thank you very much. We will now go to MP Ahsasi for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all the witnesses. The testimony you have provided has been very, very powerful. I know it wasn't easy, but I think you have all established that Islamophobia, regrettably, is alive and well, and that as a country, we should be doing much, much better to combat Islamophobia, much as we do with other hate crimes as well. Now, if I could start off with Mr. Dr. Islam. Mr. Fortin started off on a question as to what whether there are commonalities between Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. And the reason for that was he was wondering, in terms of combating Islamophobia, can we use the same tools or not? Because obviously both of them are disconcerting. You had the opportunity to say that in certain respects there were overlaps between the two, but I suspect you also wanted to elaborate on what the particularities of Islamophobia are as well, and why that's significant. Am I correct in my assessment, and would you care to elaborate on that point?
Yes, you are correct in your assessment. Even the word Islamophobia is a word that's hard to define, and much harder to define than, let's say, anti-Semitism. People are confused about does not liking Islam as a theology make one an Islamophobe, and that's not true. The word is difficult to define. I think it'd be clearer if we can use the word anti-Muslim hatred when it's a more appropriate term to use. The maintenance of the status quo internationally has a role in Islamophobia here at home. It's done on purpose and make Muslim Canadians into an outside entity, a fifth column. And so that type of Islamophobia does not have an overlap with anti-Semitism. Certainly, the people who fall into the Great Replacement theory and the white nationalism, there's a strong overlap there in the root causes and explanations. In fact, the Great Replacement theory says that it's a Jewish conspiracy to have Muslim or Black or other minorities come into North America to replace the voting bloc. That's ludicrous, but that's what they believe.
That now, Mr. Babili, I'm so terribly sorry about the indifference you encountered with your elected official, with the University of Victoria. It truly is unacceptable that you went through such a terrible and such a harrowing experience, and they did not address it appropriately. My question for the panelists, and I will start with Mr. Babili, is unfortunately we've seen a steep rise in anti-Semitism over the course of the past 7 months. Is it your assessment that the rise in Islamophobia has increased considerably in the last 7 months as well? If I could start off with Mr. Babili.
Yeah, great question. I think for the past 7 months, Islamophobia has been incredibly increased. We can see this through, in the streets, universities, protests where people would be counter-protester will come and say racial comments, right? I believe that yes, the answer to that question is yes, it has been increased.
And then very briefly, if we could go to Mr. Islam, Dr. Islam, Mr. Nalir, and Ms. Shilbaye, please. Dr. Islam?
Sorry, I'm going to let
very briefly. Has it really multiplied in the last 7 months, Islamophobia, in your opinion?
Yes, it has multiplied. Anything that's adding to the reservoir of hate causes the reservoir to rise. Doesn't matter what source it's coming from.
Sure. Sorry, because of the limited time. I will go to Mr. Nalir.
I'm sorry, time is up, but I would encourage if there's anything to send in, please do. And I think it could be the very last 5 minutes to Mr. Fortin.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for the student Omar Abili. Currently, in the criminal code, there is a section that makes it illegal to foment hate. But there is an exception to this. So no one can be found guilty of a crime when they have, in good faith, expressed an opinion about a religion or religious text that they believe in. So you're not allowed to foment hate or anti-Semitism, but in fact you can do that unless you're expressing yourself in good faith about a religious subject. Now, recently a bill was introduced to eliminate those exceptions so that under no circumstances can anyone foment hatred or anti-Semitism, whether it's based on a religious text or not. It should just be forbidden. So I'd like to know if in 30 seconds you could comment on that, because I will be asking the same question of the other panelists. So, Mr. Babili, please.
Loud. That's my short question, short answer.
Merci. J'avais pas le bon monsieur.
Actually, I'm sorry. I meant, I see the student in the top right who's in the panel now, but he hasn't necessarily asked any questions yet. So I'd like Hamza Omar to answer. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but perhaps Mr. Nalir on the same question.
Avez-vous entendu la question?
Did you hear the question?
Bon, OK, on va laisser faire.
Let's move on then. Dr. Islam, I'm so sorry. We only have a few seconds. So, Dr. Islam, could you please give us your opinion on Section 319 in the Criminal Code and that exception? Because what do you think about eliminating that exception?
Not know what it is, but if what you're describing is the case, you can certainly disagree about theology. I don't see how it should extend to hatred or to a promotion of prejudice, and certainly not to violence.
Merci.
Never.
Merci, Dr.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go back to Shafni Nalir. I don't know if your microphone is working, but could you also answer the question, please?
Vous n'avez pas entendu la question?
Did you hear the question?
He's trying. Go ahead, Mr. Nalir. Yes.
Yeah, I got the question. Again, I like Dr. Islam mentioned, I'm not too sure what, when it comes to criticizing theology, what that has to do about hate. But again, you've heard us testify about the rise of Islamophobia. And now when we tell you about our loss of life, Dr. Islam, his family, Omar almost getting killed, by a truck, and the risk to us, and we're not allowed to grieve. So I'm not too sure why Member Gladue comes with those questions about protesting and things like that. We're telling you that people have almost been killed, and then you reply with that kind of stuff. So that's kind of odd to me.
OK, donc si je résume, Monsieur Nalir.
So then, to sum up, would you be in favor of eliminating that exception so that inciting hatred is forbidden regardless of what the basis of the argument is?
Ai-je bien compris? Oui.
Did I understand you correctly or not?
Yeah, hatred should not be incited. But I have to look at the bill in order to respond like that.
OK. Merci.
Thank you. Ms. Shilbai, Doreen Shilbai, what do you think? Do you think that when it comes to inciting hatred, there should be an exception when there is a religious text involved, or should that exception be removed? Ms. Shidbai, did you hear my question?
To give a proper answer, but hate should not lead to violence, and that we can be accepting of.
J'entends pas, Madame la Présidente. Là, je sais pas.
Merci. Thank
Madam Chair, I couldn't hear.
And for the final maybe minute or a couple of minutes, because Mr. Garrison is okay not to do a full 5 minutes, over to you, Mr. Garrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to return to something I mentioned earlier, and that is one of our witnesses has reported to me from a previous session that disadvantageous action has been threatened against them as a result of their appearing before committee. This witness does not wish to be identified publicly at this point. My office is working with them. If this threat continues, then I will bring the appropriate motion regarding contempt of Parliament before this committee, as testimony of witnesses is protected and they may not suffer adverse consequences from an appearance here. So I would just like the committee to know that that has happened, but I also don't wish to put that witness at further risk if we can solve this problem before it goes any further. So I just wanted the committee to be aware that has happened. And if it does not cease, and the people who know about this will be hearing me, if it does not cease, then I will bring in a motion to committee regarding contempt of Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Zabiri.
Madam Chair, I'd like to also note that this has happened at other committees that I've been part of, like the Subcommittee of International Human Rights. It's been on the record that Mehmet Toti, who is a Uyghur advocate, was threatened in advance of his testimony. And I do think that that we need to take these sorts of threats to life or the life of a loved one very seriously, as did happen to him in the past. And he's been on the record as such. So I think that these points are important. Our witnesses, we call them here to freely testify. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So witnesses, thank you very much for coming today. Again, all the members appreciate very much you being candid and you appearing with us. If there's anything you feel that you can contribute to us that you were asked and were not able to fully respond to, which brings me to what I need to ask the committee on, is that, so first of all, send your answers, but also for the committee here today, the date, what I'm proposing is the following: the date of Friday, June 21, be the equivalent time to the deadline of briefs for anti-Semitism. So for this study, for anti-Islamophobia, so I want to put on record that June 21 will be the deadline for anybody to be able to submit any briefs for this study. And again, I think the reminder is they were to be 3 pages in length. And I think that brings us to the end of our committee. Witnesses, thank you very much. Members, thank you very much. We will, yes. Does anybody have their hand up based on what I said? Yes, Mr. Garrison?
I think we just need to be careful about the holiday in giving a deadline.
What
So
holiday?
we're talking about the National Day for Reconciliation, which is an official national holiday, and just want to make sure there's no conflict with the dates that we're setting. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening carefully enough.
I think people can submit until June 21. If there's anything wrong with that date, we'll move it to 20 or 22, but I'll come back on Thursday after I hear from the analysts